Welcome back to the Act Two podcast, a podcast for the real life working screenwriter. I'm Tasha Hugh.
And I'm Josh Hallman.
And this is an episode about confidence. Something Josh and I do not have.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing about something that happened 10 seconds ago.
Josh doesn't even have confidence in introducing the podcast. That's how bad it is, guys.
I feel like you just do it so well that I was going to let you just do it again.
That's the definition of lack of confidence.
All right. In addition to confidence, we're talking about imposter syndrome and smoke and mirrors as a writer. And I think this goes across all areas of the entertainment industry, but especially as a writer. And I feel like so many people we know all feel like they've had imposter syndrome at some point in time, right?
Yeah. I feel like it's a weekly experience for me.
And we're going to talk about that. And also, I feel like when you're a writer, you have to have confidence in what you're doing, because we both know that if at some point you're kind of displaying some insecurity about a story that you're writing or a decision that you're making, people latch onto that and they kind of lose faith in you. And I feel like we need to kind of talk about that, and then also talk about the ego of when to kind of back down from one of your ideas, and because maybe you're latched onto it because it's a passion idea, it's something that you just don't want to change. Who knows? I think we've all been there.
I feel like you just pitched a 3-act structure for confidence. One is imposter syndrome. That's act 1, when you're just low and you don't think you can pull it off. And then act 2 is smoke and mirrors, where you are confident and that's a selling point for you, and you're jiving and everyone feels it in the room. And then 3 is ego. You've gone too far. Come back.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I saw it on a Tony Robbins cast when I was watching about lack of confidence.
Shut up.
That is not true, by the way. Not true. All right, Tasha, what's imposter syndrome? Let's start there.
It's where I live. Imposter syndrome is something that is obviously not restricted to just writing, but I feel like almost always 99.9% of writers do feel it. It's the sense that you feel like an imposter in the room. Like at any moment, someone is going to notice that you cannot handle this job, that you are way in over your head. You don't know what you're doing. You can't write. Oh my gosh, why are they trusting you to write a feature or a TV show? You're just a kid with ideas and you're stupid. That's where imposter syndrome lives.
Everyone has that.
Fucks with you. Yes, everyone has it. And at every level, there are producers who have it as well. Like they don't feel like they belong in the room, and they're really scared when they give a note because they think they're going to sound stupid. So it happens at every level. We don't care about those people. We only care about the writers. But if you feel it, please know that every single person feels it as well.
And I guess the question is, how do you get over it? What do you do about it as a writer? As anyone? Are we just talking about writers? Are we just talking about human beings at this point?
I think this is the episode where it merges.
Oh, God.
Now it's just a philosophy podcast. I mean, for me, and like I said, it's almost a weekly thing where sometimes it's just like a pinprick of imposter syndrome.
Sure.
But it still happens. And I think, like with everything in life, the more you experience things and the better you get at this job, and just the longer you're in it, the smaller that imposter syndrome is until you kind of can stamp it out. But I feel like even at the highest levels, it still exists. I mean, when you hear interviews about big time directors and producers, like they'll often talk about like moments of self doubt where they didn't think they could pull it off.
Right.
So I think it's just always there, but it's my answer, I guess, would just be experience and knowing that gaining confidence is going to be part of your journey, and it's something you have to actively work on.
Yeah, it just over time, you just kind of deal with it over time, right? Like that's the only way, unless you're an incredibly confident individual who comes in and like, I don't have imposter syndrome. This is who I am. This is what I'm doing. That's great.
Do you know anyone like that besides like narcissistic psychopaths?
No, I don't know. I feel like I've met people like that at some point, but maybe they were just projecting an image in which they want it to be.
Well, I think that is really interesting because obviously people do that. And when I look at you, particularly when you pitch something, I feel like you're just exuding confidence. And
Boom, thank you.
I mean, the fact that this episode was your idea says that like there is some kind of level of actually, no, the confidence is a bit of a smoke and mirrors to an extent. Not to call you out.
Yeah, first of all, that just cut to my core, and, I guess I don't know what else to say about it. So, but yeah, I guess I'm not saying I do this, but I've definitely heard people over time talk about, like, they look at themselves as brands, right? Where you're like, "I need to kinda project this certain individual that I wanna be," and people can just dial into it and say, "This is what I'm gonna do for 1 hour." You know, I'm gonna pitch something, I'm gonna be in a room with someone, and this is the individual I'm gonna be, like a mental
Sasha
case.
Fierce.
Sasha freaking Fierce. Yes. And so everyone turns into Sasha Fierce, and maybe, after a while, Sasha Fierce is who you become.
I think that's actually really smart. I Gosh, just thinking about how imposter syndrome affects your work. Like for me, particularly when I first started, it was very much alive whenever I'd have to go into a room to pitch anything. And whether it was a formal pitch or I was just meeting with producers who wanted to talk about ideas, I was always just overcome with this overwhelming sense that they're going to know that I'm stupid. They're going to find out and they're going to
Sure,
kick me out of this room. And
sure.
I think over time I had to realize, no, I am smart. I do understand the way writing works, but I just don't think that I do. And so there was some aspect of tricking myself into going into rooms with confidence, which took a very long time and I still haven't mastered it. But one of the techniques I would use would be meditation, as much as Josh makes
Hey.
fun of me for not meditating. Um,
Uh-huh.
Whenever I like 5-10 minutes before going into a room, if when I'm sitting in a lobby waiting for everyone, I would click on the calming
Okay.
app on my phone, and I would just like listen to that, or in the car before I go up to the waiting room to just like
Sure.
calm my breathing, and because once my heart starts beating real fast and I get in my head about things, it's over. So if I can
Right.
just like put a stopper on that before I get into the room, then that at least helps me a little bit. So that's one way I was able to combat it at an early stage.
Yeah. I guess just over time, you just have to get used to it.
Yeah, and I'd be curious, like, what you do to stop the nerves because I think over time you find ways that work for you. Because the nerves are really like the backbone of imposter syndrome because it's all just
Yeah.
these like fake thoughts going on in your head telling you you're not good enough, which happens across all aspects of our life, but in writing can just really start kicking up. So there are definitely mechanisms you can put in place to sort of stop that from happening. For me, it was meditation and this kind of like not full Sasha Fierce just because I don't have that ability to act inside of
Yeah,
me to
yeah.
just like separate myself, but to like kind of give myself a pep talk in my own brain of like, you got this, you're smart, you can handle this, you're here for a reason, even if I didn't believe it at the moment.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it sounds so lame to say, but that just, like, reminding yourself that life is really short and you're gonna die probably pretty soon is always a really good reminder for me to just kinda be like, "Well, fuck it. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it all out here and see what happens because if I don't, I'm gonna regret it for the rest of my life."
I think that is actually a really great way of thinking about it. Like that's the way you let go, right? I mean, that's something therapists try and teach you forever is learn to let go. There's a fragility to life, especially in 2020. I think there's a sense of like just fucking go for it.
Yeah,
Who
why not?
cares?
Who cares? We're on a Zoom chat and someone's cat's in the background. Let's go.
Yeah. I think another
Um,
thing that has helped me with imposter syndrome is A, realizing that people across the table from me are also feeling it, which is sort of that the equivalent of like giving a speech and imagining everyone naked. Like it's that kind
right.
of thing where it's just like an equalizer. But two, it's kind of this sense of like kind of what you said, I guess. Like I will regret it if I don't give my all. So if I'm going to regret it, like why don't I just be present in this moment and
Right,
do the
right,
best
right.
I can?
You know, one time, uh, our friend Dave Levinson, who I've now probably mentions, I think like 3 weeks in a row, he probably doesn't remember this, but like years ago, I was talking to him and I think I had a meeting with someone or I was having some problems writing or something like that. And the conversation turned into such basic, like, writing 101. And I remember him just being like, "Josh, you know what you're doing. Like, you know how to write," something like that. And if for some reason it just kind of hit me where I was like, "Oh, yeah, I do know what I'm doing. Okay, I'm good. Like, thanks, man." Like, you just sometimes need to be reminded that you can do what you're trying to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. A big part of imposter syndrome is us telling ourselves we can't actually do the thing that we are born to do, like that we know
Yeah,
we can do. That's why it's evil and it's terrible, but you can defeat it.
you can defeat it. It's like Voldemort. So, under the umbrella of imposter syndrome, I want to kind of talk about confidence for a second. And the difference between confidence and ego, in particular, if you're writing a project, and let's say you have a spec, or if you're giving a draft to producers, and those producers challenge your vision, and they say, you know, we don't like this, but in your mind, you just love it. And I guess there's a very fine line between having that ego and you're just kind of sticking to your vision, and maybe you're going to upset the producers, or whatever the case, or having the confidence to stick with your vision. Do you see what I'm saying? It basically comes from
Yeah.
two different areas. It's like the confident area and the ego
Are
area.
you able to pinpoint the difference between the 2 when you're in it?
Yeah, I think confidence is more related to kind of having a belief in what you've done, and ego's a little bit more rooted in like insecurity about what's going on, I think. And more times than not, I feel like if people start calling you out, you kind of get in this defense mode and your ego kind of takes over. You're like, this is the only vision that could happen with this project. And you just start arguing about it.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and that's really well said. I think ego very much comes from a place of fear. I know in times where I've fought back about notes, which is very rare because again, I'm extremely insecure, so I automatically assume what you're saying is right. Um, but when I have fought back, it's been from a place of like various versions of fear. Like one could be, "Oh fuck, I don't want to have to go back and revise this whole thing. I'm going to
Right.
fight for this to prove that it's right so that I don't have to go do that work because it's so hard."
Right.
To convincing myself that the reason why they have this note is because I am a bad writer. And if this note is real that they're giving me, then that's just proof that I'm a bad writer. And so I react. So that's very much ego versus confidence, which is what you were saying is more of a strong belief in the work versus believing that it's attached to who you are.
Yeah. So, a quick story. One time I was writing a passion project that with my manager, Jay-Z. And we had just gotten done working on something, and he was like, "Hey, we were just talking about ideas and what to work on next." And I landed on a very like a passion project, a project that was very close to me. And as you know, I kind of go outside the box, and I'm not really like, I like to kind of stuff emotions into big stories. It's not really personal stories to me. It's just kind of, they're hidden in there, my
Big
my
fun
emotions.
adventures with a heart.
There you go. And I remember kind of coming to him with this passion project, and he gave me notes on it. And I remember getting incredibly defensive. And I was like, why am I getting so defensive on this? Because I'm never like this. Like, usually I listen to his notes and they're really always great. But in this case, it was like, no, this is how it has to be. Boom, 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 boom. And I realized, one, it was so close to me that I felt like no one could ever give me notes on it. And also it was just my ego, because this was my story. There's no one's changing this. And you kind of latch on to that. And I ended up not writing it because I said I was not emotionally prepared to do it. I was like, Jay-Z, I'm out. I can't do this right now. I'm backing out of it. I think this is we're not gonna see eye to eye. This is gonna like wreck us. And I think he agreed with me.
Oh, wow. Was it an outline that you gave him?
Yeah, it was just a pretty extensive outline.
That's interesting. Can I ask, because I have a similar story. So I'm curious, did you have a really strong sort of vision for what it should look like that he was disagreeing with? Was he trying to change like the DNA of the idea, or was he just saying, "Hey, let's talk about it and work it out." And you're like, "No, like there's no working out. It's exactly what's in the outline. That's it."
That's how I was. It was all my ego. Like, and I made some judgments about certain characters, and I was like, no, this character can't be different. This person has to be doing this. This person, these characters can't change. This is set. And I'm sure his notes were great. I don't really remember what they were, but he was just probably trying to make me open up the story a bit. But Yeah, it was I was just not receptive to it.
Do you feel like you would give earlier Josh a different advice going into that if you could go back in time?
I would have said, "Don't try to write a passion project."
So you'd
Just
end up in
keep
the same place, just not doing it.
Yeah, I would just I actually remember calling him and being like, "Hey, man, here's the situation. I'm too close to this. I can't do this." And he's like, "Okay."
Do you think you'll ever write it?
Uh, no, not that one.
This story ended sadly.
Well, yeah. What's your story?
I guess my story is also sad. I I was so excited about this one idea, and I didn't really have an outline. It wasn't that fully fleshed out. I had a very clear vision for the opening, which was fucking cool, and then I knew thematically what I wanted to deal with, which was this, like, really great kind of pertinent theme that I really believed in about, morality and judgment and how we see people, and who cares? Like, I'll figure out how to get there, but this is what I'm doing, manager, and she was like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, I don't understand your theme, and I don't understand how this story is an example of that theme." And she started like throwing out ideas of what I could do, and I was like, "No, oh my god, no, I don't. None of that is good. Like, I don't like any of that. None of that is fitting in with my vision of what this should be." And there was so much back and forth, and she really genuinely tried to work with me to find out, to like suss out why I was so passionate about this idea. And I think I just
yeah,
couldn't express it or articulate it, which in her view, and this is often the case with people who are not writers, if you cannot articulate it to someone, they feel like you haven't figured it out and it's dead. So either go do some more work or like kill it and work on
right.
something else. Whereas I feel like as a writer, sometimes something is very just nebulous in your head, and not until you get through a couple drafts even is it going to
Yeah.
really present itself. And so I this is also a sad story. I never ended up like fully committing to that idea, and it's still just like a shitty outline on my computer somewhere, because I just didn't have the confidence anymore that I could pull off this story.
Wow, it sounds like you had the confidence with some great opening and great themes.
She
No?
tore me down, man.
God. So, how do you know if you're a writer, how do you know if your ego's, like, becoming a problem in your career? Is there any way to know? Do you just need people to tell you?
I bet it's like if you find yourself being combative with people and that's a frequent uh situation for you, like
Yeah.
that's a common dynamic in various people that you work with, then there's probably an ego situation.
Mhm.
Because if it was confidence, you're not going to be butting heads in that same kind of brazen manner. And I think there's one story, for example, with a pilot of mine, and I was working on with a producer where she kept giving me the same note and I would ignore it.
Mhm.
And usually, like when you ignore a note, a producer would be like, okay, they didn't really like that note, so I won't bring it up again. Or sometimes they'll just keep bringing it up. And in this case, she just kept bringing it up. And I kept trying to politely not address it. And then finally I had to be like, I'm not doing it. I don't agree with it. I think that my version is better and it's going to work. Just trust me. And she usually does, but in this case she was like, I'm not going to trust you. I don't think this is
Wow.
right. And I had to like go home and be like, am I being egotistical about this or am I being properly confident about this? Because at the end of the day, you are the writer. You have those instincts where someone else doesn't. But
Mhm.
if you continually get the same note, you have to sit back and be like, okay, is it ego or confidence? And I
Yeah.
tried a version that was what she wanted it to be, mostly to just like get her off my fucking back. And it was great. Like, it was way better than my version,
Wow.
and I learned a huge lesson ab about, like, because the scene was 2 characters talking in a room, and she was like, "This is not
Alright.
interesting." And I'm like, "I'll make it interesting because the dialogue's gonna be epic." And she's like,
Yeah.
"No, I mean, as good as you can do with dialogue, like, it's still not interesting." And, so I changed it. I had stuff going on in the scene, and there was movement, and it was dynamic, and it just made it way better. She was right. But again, I knew that there was something wrong when she kept
Yeah.
giving me the note, and I had to reflect.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. When you're combative and arguing with people over and over, if it happens to you multiple times, then you might be the problem.
Yeah, I think that's the key.
I actually knew someone who was very combative with reps over and over again. And he was going through different agents and different managers, and he was a really good writer. And every time I would talk to him, he would always kind of tell me a story and always kind of blame the reps. And at like the first and second time I was with him, I believed him. I was like, yeah, it was probably them. And then by like the fourth time, I was thinking, I think it's you, man. I think it's you. And that's the ego right there.
You are the common denominator. Yeah. Real quick, I just feel like this is actually is a really big topic to have because I do feel like ego and confidence can get in the way of a writer's successful career.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's like the one thing getting in the way. Like people talk to each other all the time, and if someone feels like you're a piece of shit to work with, you're always
Yeah.
arguing, they're going to tell someone else and you're going to suddenly find yourself without work. No one wants to work with you.
Yeah. That's actually really interesting because as a writer, you have to be very aware of it. You have, well, like what you just said, you have to be very aware that people talk, and if you're causing all these problems because of your ego, it's going to hurt you long term. But that doesn't mean to be, you
A
know, a
pushover.
yes man. Yeah, a pushover and just say, "Okay, okay, yes to everything," because then you become a fucking pushover and no one wants that.
No. And also another story about that, I do know a writer who fits that bill perfectly, and they've had some successes. They've actually sold scripts and gotten jobs at major studios, but they've never ever gone further than like those first two jobs because
Mhm.
they will take every single note that's given to them and suddenly their script is just a hodgepodge of notes from people who aren't writers. And so, yeah, like there's definitely going the other extreme where you're a pushover and you're not trusting yourself to do the work of a creator. So there's a sweet middle ground that you somehow
Right,
need to find where just talking about notes, the notes process in particular, where you're taking notes, you're absorbing it, you're throwing out ones that don't work, that aren't good ideas, and you're trusting yourself to make the correct choices. So
right.
that's where confidence comes in, and then ego is saying, "Fuck you, none of your notes are good," and then lack of confidence is the other side where you take everyone's notes. So again, it's experience and it's instinct, but finding that middle ground is the sweet spot for you as a writer.
Yeah. I would also say that if you don't address some of these notes, have a reason why you didn't if someone questions you about it, and have the confidence behind it and say, "This is why X, Y, and Z." And it's not just some ego-driven thing where it's like, "That's just not what I wanted."
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Has lack of confidence in your writing ever made you make a bad decision?
I think that's a really good question. I can't think of any specific times where I felt that I went against what was correct writing wise,
Yeah,
in order to appease someone. But
sure.
no, I can't think of any. Do you have any specifics where you did something and you were like, "Why did I do that? I did it because I was a pushover in that moment."
None that I can think of. I'm sure it's happened though. I've probably just blocked them all out of my memory.
I think particularly early on, and honestly, like all the way through maybe just a couple years ago, I have definitely been in meetings where producers would give me notes and I would panic for a second because I'd be like, "Oh, they're obviously right and I'm wrong and I need to figure out how to do what they're saying." But every time
Mhm.
I'd go home and think about it, I would realize that like the root of their thought or their note is right, but their stupid solutions aren't going to work. And my confidence comes back because I'm doing what I'm good at, which is figuring out solutions and writing. So I think that there's moments of where lack of confidence in the room is like, "Oh, you're right. I will go do that producer X because you're so right and I'm so wrong. I'm just a stupid
Right.
writer." And then you go home and you sort of deal with it and manage it in a better, more healthy way. So there are moments in a room that I probably regret, but it's never led to
Yeah.
like making poor decisions in my actual writing, as far as I can tell.
And so then how much of, going back to the smoke and mirrors, and I hope we're not jumping around too much between smoke and mirrors, confidence, and
This is the
ego.
philosophy episode, man. Doesn't
Yeah, it
matter.
is. I f it's interesting because before we started, you're kinda like, "Why are we talking about this? Why do you wanna talk about this?" And I think you could sense that it might go all over the place.
It's a
And you just
really
went,
important topic, but it is kind of unwieldy because it's so general and it's just such a like a general problem that we all
yeah,
have.
it's a general problem we all have. Yes. So how much of like smoke and mirrors and exuding this, let's say you're this person who has no confidence whatsoever, but you're fully aware, I need to go smoke and mirrors. How much of that do you think, like how often do you have to put that on? Like forever in the entertainment industry?
Until it becomes real for you. I mean, I think fake it till you make it has worked for me
Oh
very
wow.
well. And you know what's interesting is I have you to credit for a lot of this because in very early days you would always talk about how you talk with your hands and how much it helps you. And you weren't necessarily saying that talking with your hands helps you with confidence, but I think for you it like helps you be able to explain things better in a very Italian manner. But for
Hey,
me, I started using my hands when I was pitching, and there was
yeah,
something that happened, Josh. I don't know, like a weird click happened in my brain where like that suddenly created confidence. I think it just like created a, and like I'm doing it right now. It just created
yeah,
this energy within myself that was less like me sitting down, like kind of curled into myself with just my pitch sitting in front of me, pitching to people, and like it
yeah,
forced me to sit up, like I raised my chest, like my hands were out, like I was
for
engaging with
sure.
other people, and suddenly like that fake confidence because I was forcing myself to use my hands to talk actually helped me gain real confidence. So you solved my life. Thank you.
That's the best thing I've ever heard. Do you know how many people have told me? Some people I've like thrown my hands in like around like people have called me out on it before, but those hands keep flying. I can't stop it.
Never question it. It's brilliant.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's just who I am. I just talk with my hands. I can't help it.
I think it's important because can't tell you how many times I've gone into a room and pitched, not gotten the job, but the response is always like, "Wow, you have such great energy. You pitch that with such confidence." And what they don't know is I have absolutely zero confidence in what I've just pitched you. I'm utterly terrified. um, but you come in with this like fake air of confidence, and it means so much to people. Like they very much respond to that. So this is an important conversation, as kind of unwieldy and philosophical as it is. It's definitely something that you should practice as a writer as much as you
Right.
practice writing in many ways.
No, I agree. And I think as a writer, you just have to be very self-aware. And I think a lot of writers are pretty self-aware actually, but you have to be very aware of you're kind of getting in your own way. And if you're you just you have to do like that emotional check-in always with yourself as a writer. Just be like, am I on the right track? Am I like mentally just done? Because it happens to all of us where you get enough rejections, considering this entire industry is like rejection based. And after a while, it just starts like beating you up until you become either numb to it or you just go away.
Yeah.
Your
I mean,
confidence is always under attack in the entertainment industry.
it really is. It's why I think you have to actively think about it because I think you and I both know so many people who have left the business, tried to be a writer, couldn't do it because the rejection gets so hard and their
Yeah.
confidence just disappears and their lack of confidence convinces them they can't do it, which a lot of A-list writers, like I feel like John August and Craig Mazin have said this before, where like they're only successful because they kept going.
Hmm.
And I think that's a huge thing that keeps me going is that I don't have any better skills than anyone else, but I have this like grit. Like even if you tell me I'm horrible, I will still keep going because I don't know what else to
Yeah.
do. And I think building confidence as like an actual part of my repertoire as a writer, the same way again, like you would build your outlining skills or your how you write an act one, like having confidence as part of your toolkit, I think is a really big deal in this business to build a career.
Wow. Every writer is probably going to struggle with it.
It's hard, guys. It's really hard. You all know, you're
um,
all suffering from it. I mean,
yeah.
I know plenty of writers, by the way, who completely shut down, like robots who are just powering down because their confidence is taken away from them. And I think if you're able to notice yourself doing that, and then realize A, every writer goes through that, but B, the writers who are successful push through that and write anyways, that is going to be a huge key to having a career.
I agree. All right. Let me throw one more thing in, something I wanted to talk about. When we talked about reps earlier, managers and agents, there was a friend of ours actually who once told me that you need to manage your reps. He would say you need to manage your managers and manage your agents. And I never understood what that meant. And I'm still maybe sometimes trying to figure it out.
No, I think what's actually really interesting about connecting confidence to managing your reps is important because I have often been in meetings with my reps where I'm like, all right, I'm going in and I'm telling them what I want and they're going to do it. And this is going to, like, I'm going to have a plan. And I've written down
Yeah.
all the things that I want to talk to them about that I want to make sure they're doing for me. And then, like, at the end of the meeting, I feel like a child. Like, I've
Yeah.
just been completely like dressed down and not like they intend to do that. There's just something that happens with like the kind of personality that agents have or managers where there's just a sense like you're the little kid in the room. And a big part of my growth, and I'm definitely not there yet, but I'm getting much better, is that in those conversations with people who make me feel that way, I just try to hold my ground and try to be a presence. I have my notes of what I want to address in this call or in this meeting, and I make
Yeah.
sure I go through them. And it's so hard because again, my default is imposter syndrome. So as soon as someone like pokes a hole in my confidence, I deflate and go back to my default. So yeah, confidence is definitely something you're going to have to work on with your reps as well. And it really comes up when you're like asking them to do something for you and you need them to do something for you for your career and they're not doing it. And I think it's a
Yeah.
fight that every writer has experienced. And that's not an ego thing, that's a confidence thing.
Can we go back just 1 second? When you said you have your notes that you want to talk about, have you ever had notes in a meeting with your reps like written out in front of you?
Yeah.
What? Really?
Yeah. These are I'm speaking specifically to like back before pandemic era, we would
Of
have
course.
like kind of quarterly meetings or
Oh,
twice
I
a
see.
year meetings, right? So it's like those are the check-in meetings where I want to make sure that I tell them that I want to try to get a studio job and I want to try to get on a TV show. Like these are the things
Yeah.
I need to tell them that I want and then we need to have a discussion about how to get there. So I just have these topics essentially that I want to talk about.
So, I guess in conclusion with all of this, know what you want, have confidence. So easy to say. Be aware of your ego and just be aware that everyone is possibly in the smoke and mirrors realm. Not
Everyone's in the
everyone.
smoke and mirrors. Now, I mean, I think everyone. That's a big thing for me. What and whenever I like listen to a panel of other writers, like A-list writers, I'm always waiting for that moment where they do lift the veil and reveal this vulnerable thing that they're actually in the middle of the smoke and mirrors act as well, where like their
Yeah.
confidence is fake. Like I want to know that because I want to know that if my confidence is fake, that's okay too. And I remember hearing, I think it was Craig Mazin talk about how he once was at a notes meeting, got a bunch of notes at some studio. So it was probably a huge table, a lot of people in suits, fairly intimidating for a little writer. And he was still Craig Mazin. He was still this big writer at the time. He got all these
Right.
notes and he said, "Excuse me 1 second." And he left, went to the bathroom and puked and then came
Whoa.
back and then continued the meeting. And there's this like I remember hearing that story and being like, "Oh, thank God. Thank God I'm
Oh,
not the only
wow.
one who panics and feels so beaten down in these notes meetings. Someone else also has anxiety problems too, and they're very successful." So, yeah, smoke and mirrors is at every level. It's something that you have to learn how to actively manage and don't let it go by the wayside. It's something to pay attention to.
Wow. Maybe we should get Craig Mazin on here to talk about that experience.
If it wasn't Craig Mason who said that, I feel like I'm about to get sued, but I'm pretty sure it was.
All right. Well, it may or may not have been. And no judgment because we're all going to throw up at some point anyway.
Yeah,
All right. Well, we did it. Hit us with the quote of the day.
this is about confidence.
Hmm.
Don't give up. You're going to get kicked in the teeth a lot. Learn to take a hit, then pick yourself up off the floor. Resilience is the true key to success. Melissa Rosenberg. If you'd like more real life screenwriting chats, commiseration, tips, and tricks, check out our Instagram at ActTwoWriters. This podcast was edited by Paul Lundquist, music by 414 Bag, which you can find on Spotify.